the Leafs have made a sneaky signing, and this signing could change everything for the Leafs for years to come. So to break down exactly who this signing is, why Leafs fans are pumped up about it, and discuss what the impact can be going forward for the team. We'll break all that down in this episode, but before we do, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you for bearing with the quality. I'm back home now for my vacation, so the quality will be back to normal. So thank you for that. But Darius, a lot to go over today, and yesterday the Leafs made a very interesting move, and no, unfortunately, it's not a player, it's not a forward, it's not what many Leafs fans wanted to see the Leafs do. But many Leafs fans are actually very excited about this one. We're going to break it all down. Let's not waste any more time. You can see here, breaking, the Leafs have announced they have hired Mark Leach as the team's new head of amateur scouting, and Leach spent 11 seasons with the Dallas Stars amateur coaching staff. Now, on the surface, you might be thinking, hey, why is this a big deal? Why does this change everything for the Leafs for years to come? Darius, I'll let you take over here. This guy has a very good track record, like a very, very good track record. And for a team in the Toronto Maple Leafs who need some help scouting, we'll say. Obviously, they made a few good picks, but they're really trying to augment their scouting department and drafting better prospects, quite frankly. This could be very important for years to come, especially depending how the core four does over the next few years and as they start to turn over into a bit of a younger core here.
Yeah, one thing the Leafs have had, a problem that the Leafs have had in the last couple of years, and Kyle Dubas said it before he left, they have no players that can come up and fill spots from the Marlies. It's gotten a little bit better in the last, maybe year or two, but for the most part, they have little to no players that can come up and make an impact. Like Bobby McMahon, for example, is a good example of a guy who did that this past season. But other than that, I can't really think of too many good examples. And when you look at Wes Clark and his departure, not too many of the players that he drafted as well made the NHL or made a significant impact. Not too many, right? So looking at his departure, a lot of Leaf fans were saying, he did a good job. And I think the majority of Leaf fans were happy that he left because obviously a lot of the prospects he decided to take, like I said, haven't really developed. And when you look at the Leafs too, they have a lot of resources and they have a lot of money MLSE can use to go out and get the best possible people for certain positions. And I think they've done that with this hiring, right? This is a guy who has Detroit under his drafting track record and Dallas in recent years. And if you look at Dallas in the last couple of years, I mean, Jason Robertson, Jake Ottinger, Wyatt Johnson, Logan Stankoven, right? Like guys who've come up and made a big impact in the last couple of years in the playoffs for the Dallas Stars. So now they have the guy who made those decisions and made those draft choices under their belt in Toronto. So, we're not going to see there's no immediate impact in signing this guy. We're going to see it in maybe 3 years, 5 years down the road, right? But if you look at the track record of players he's drafted, I mean, Dallas, they've completely changed the way they played because they're a more exciting team now with more exciting young players and like Stankoven coming in and Johnston, right? Dallas was able to trade away Dellandrea because they just have too many young, good players coming up. So now Toronto has obviously this guy working for them. So I'm glad. I was kind of puzzled, like when Wes Clark left, who are they going to hire? And I think they hired maybe the best possible person for the job.
Yeah, when Wes Clark was let go, this guy was a name that was brought up a little bit. And you see it here, 11 seasons with the Stars. But the track record kind of speaks for itself. And again, this is Wes Clark's replacement. And a lot of us were down on Wes Clark leaving. He had a decent track record. But at the end of the day, they're always trying to improve, and maybe they had Mark Leach on their radar anyway, which made it easier for them not to match whatever Wes Clark's offer was when he left the Maple Leafs. And you mentioned it. He, if you're unfamiliar with him, we get into some of his history here. He joined the Leafs following 11 seasons with the Stars. You mentioned he drafted Nick Robertson's brother, Jason Robertson, and in Dallas, he worked directly with the Stars, director of amateur scouting, so similar to what he's doing now to oversee. Of course, it's mainly about the draft. And you mentioned we're not going to get direct impacts like tomorrow or when the season starts. We're not going to see direct impacts, but it's going to be similar to Wes Clark when he drafted Easton Cowan and some of those guys, Fraser Minton. But you can see here he also did 20 seasons with the Red Wings from 1994 to 2013. Like, this guy has a ton of experience under his belt, and he's a really highly touted name among other, coaching staffs around the NHL. And you see here, he's an impressive scouting record, and quite frankly, I'm excited for this one. I did like Wes Clark, though. I remember in the video we made, a lot of you guys were saying in the comment section, basically, obviously Easton Cowan was good, but he hasn't really, Wes Clark did, and not to throw shade at him, but he didn't really develop many major key talents, and this guy has. Mark Leach has, and you mentioned a bunch of them. Jason Robertson is obviously the big one that comes to mind, Wyatt as well. It's exciting if you're a Leafs fan, and these are the moves that don't pay dividends necessarily right now or even maybe in the next year or two, but we could be talking about this 2 or 3 years down the line as one of the better moves the Leafs made and what has been an interesting offseason so far for them.
Yeah, and it's not just recent success with the Dallas Stars. Like they've been to two or almost a Stanley Cup final this past year, but they were in a Stanley Cup final just a couple of years ago too. And when you look at his track record, he worked for Detroit as well. You know, you're looking at Pavel Datsyuk, right? Zetterberg, these guys. He kind of built up through scouting that team, right? Obviously, they signed a lot of free agents in that era where they won all those Stanley Cups in the late 90s, early 2000s and 2008, but he built a lot of essentially built that team right through draft picks in the later years, like the 2008 Cup. So he's obviously finding gems in the rough as well, right? So I do trust this guy. I think this is a great hire for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously, like you said, and we've been talking about, we're not going to see it in the next year, 2 years, right? You're going to see it down the line, but it's going to be a huge game changer when the Leafs, might have an injury and a guy can come up from the Marlies and make a huge impact, or maybe he just makes the team, right? And year after year, you have a bunch of younger players making the team and making impacts, because right now you have like a good prospect pool, but they kind of just hover between, fringe NHLer and Toronto Marley. So you need more guys who can come in and make impacts. And I think, with his proven track record, I think the Leafs are heading in the right direction now.
Yeah, we're seeing how the impact of Easton Cowan has had, at least on the decision-making process so far for the Toronto Maple Leafs this offseason, and how a guy who was drafted, at the time was considered a stretch, is now really making a case to maybe make the NHL team at the start of this year. So these moves end up paying dividends down the line, or sometimes even sooner. And again, this is from the Cowan thing. I want to make the team. That's always been my goal. So it kind of flows into what I was saying there, Darius. It's players who don't necessarily, or aren't necessarily drafted super high right away, or don't think are going to make a big impact, can tend to make an impact sooner than we may think. So this is a guy that hopefully, if he hits like he did with the Dallas Stars, and a lot of the players he did with the Dallas Stars could just come up and maybe help make an impact in the team. And you mentioned the Dubas thing. The Leafs need more guys like this, more players that are ready to fill in spots, because what they keep doing now is plugging in the holes on 1 year contracts. We saw John Klingberg last year. Obviously, defensemen are hard to come by at any level of hockey, but John Klingberg plugging in players from your prospect pool into the NHL can work out a lot better, and Leafs haven't been able to do that. That being said, they've also been in a competitive window here, pretty hard competitive window for the past 6 years, where you'd almost rather the veterans, especially this year as well, where they signed OEL and Chris Tanev, two veteran guys. But I think having a better mix is what the Leafs are going for here. And ultimately, I think Mark Leach is going to be the one to do that. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think like when you touched on Easton Cowan, right? Like I think next year he's probably going to make the NHL full time, like next season, right? I'm talking 25, 26, not this coming season. I think he'll get a look, but next season he'll probably make the NHL. He still needs to work on his defensive game. I've seen some comments too, people saying that they're London Knights fans, and he needs to work on his defensive game. He's not going to make the NHL full time this year. It just doesn't make sense, I don't think. But he'll get a look, and then looking towards next year, he probably will make the NHL full time, right? That's one guy, right? You need a couple more guys. And if you keep trying to build your team through trade, I just don't know if that's feasible in today's NHL. You need to develop prospects and guys who are going to be difference makers for you, right? So I think they're headed finally in the right direction in that regard, because it's been pretty dry the last couple of years, or even more than that, maybe 5 or 6 years. So heading in the right direction. I like the hire. And I think they do have some prospects coming up now that are exciting. But if you look at the whole scope, I think they can do a better job at that, and they might just start doing that.
Yeah, I think he's the start of that. But never say never on Easton Cowan. Never say never. Maybe he plays
This is true.
the whole
This is
season
true.
this year. But let us know in the comments your thoughts are on this. Pretty exciting. Thank you guys for watching. See you soon.